So today's tutorial is going to be how to use VMware, how to install, how to set up VMware, and how to install Linux, but it could be Windows, it could be anything. VMware is virtualization. It's a hypervisor. VMware workstation is going to be a hypervisor type 2, meaning we can install it directly on top of our existing operating system. So the first thing to do, and by the way, another free one is VirtualBox. VirtualBox is amazing. It's Oracle VirtualBox. You can search it up, you can download it, and it works very, very similar to VMware. I would say that VMware has some more features. It used to be paid. When Broadcom bought out VMware, they released VMware Workstation for free. It takes a little bit to get the free license, and it's only for personal use. You can't use it for commercial, but it works great. But if you don't want to go through all of these, I highly suggest VirtualBox. And if you want, I can make another tutorial on how to use VirtualBox. Now, VMware works with Windows, Linux, and Mac. Same with VirtualBox. What's nice about virtualization software is, regardless, say I'm running Linux as my host operating system, well, then I can easily run Windows inside of Linux in a virtual machine, a sandbox area. But I can also do the opposite, and in this case, I'm running Windows and I'm going to install Linux, okay? So the first thing you need to do in order to get your free VMware for personal use is you need to go to profile.broadcom.com/web/registration, okay? So this is where you're going to first go, and you're going to go ahead and put your email address, fill out the CAPTCHA, and fill out all the required information. It's going to send you an email to verify. Go ahead and do all of that. Okay, once you do all that and you verify, now you're ready to actually download. So I can go directly to support.broadcom.com. And when I'm here, I'm all ready, so I can go to log in. And I'm in. Okay, so once you're in, you're going to want to go to the top left and you're going to want to go to software. Okay, and then from here, VMware Cloud Foundation. So go to Cloud Foundation and then go to My Downloads. It's going to load up and it's not going to find anything, but this is new, but it's got free software downloads available here. So we're going to click this. And we can scroll down and we can find what we're looking for. So we're looking for VMware Workstation Pro. Now, if you're on a Mac, you have to use VMware Fusion. And interestingly, I'm not seeing VMware Fusion here. So if you're on right here, okay, VMware Fusion. So VMware Fusion is only if you are on a Mac. And your host operating system is a Mac, and you want to virtualize Linux or Windows, okay? But if you are on Linux or Windows, then you want VMware Workstation Pro, okay? So you can go ahead and download that. And if your host operating system is Windows, you download this. If it's Linux, you download this. Once you download, you're going to go ahead and install and go through the install process, and you are ready to go. Now, in order to actually make a virtual machine, we also have to go ahead and download an ISO. If it's Windows, it's a little bit more complicated to find your ISOs. I can do another tutorial on that, but we're in Windows now, so we're going to actually use Linux. If I'm going to install Ubuntu, go to ubuntu.com, go up here to Products, go to Ubuntu Desktop, okay, and download this. This will download a .iso file, or ISO. That is the installer file. Okay, that's the same one that you'd use in Rufus to install to, say, a flash drive. And then if you install it to a flash drive, then you can go ahead and actually install it directly on bare metal on the computer. But it's also the same file that we're going to use, because it's an installer file, to be able to use it in a virtual machine. Today, though, we're not going to install Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a fantastic one, but we're going to install Fedora. Okay, so this is just another Linux distribution. This is partly funded by Red Hat. Both are very, very similar, so a lot of the Linux tutorials you'll learn, it applies both. The only thing that's going to be a major difference between Ubuntu and Fedora is going to be that Fedora is based on SE Linux. So there is, which is called Security Enhanced Linux, and that's part of the kernel. So there are some differences when you get into firewalling and some security side, but most all Linux commands work on both. The only other major difference you're going to see is the package manager to update software. Okay, so in Ubuntu, that's going to use the apt, okay, apt, or the apt apt-get, G-E-T. Usually we use apt now, but you can also use apt-get. And that's going to be to update repositories and install software. On Fedora, we use DNF, but otherwise all the commands are pretty much similar. So we're going to go here to latest release, and we've got a couple different ones. There's server, there's Plasma Desktop, and then there's Workstation. Plasma Desktop's going to be a different GUI, okay? But we're going to use the regular Workstation, which is going to also be GNOME, okay? And you can see there's lots of other things, the container optimize, there's lots of different things. Fedora is a great, great one. And even down here, we call it Atomic, Fedora Spins. I highly suggest looking around and playing with this. And one of the beautiful parts of using VMware is you can download all these different ones and install them and experiment. And if you don't like it, you can delete it. So we go to download, and it's going to start downloading. Before that, we actually have to choose our which one we want to download. So we've got for Intel and AMD x86, x64. So if you're using a regular desktop computer, you're going to want this one. Okay. For PowerPC, this is unusual. This is going to be more so for older Macs, things like this. So most people are going to use this. And then, of course, ARM is going to be very different. So this is going to be more so for like your mobile devices. So we want, this is a standard desktop computer, so we want the x86-64. That refers to the CPU architecture. So we're going to go ahead and click download, and then we'll download. Okay, now that we have our ISO downloaded for Fedora, what we're going to do now is we're going to actually create a virtual machine. So we're going to go here and say create a new virtual machine. And typical is what most people can do, especially if you're using Ubuntu. Just keep it on typical. I'm going to go through custom just to show you some of the features. So we're going to click next. We want compatible. This is the newest. This really depends on what you're doing. If you want to create a virtual machine that you're later to move something like EXI or vSphere, where you use a hypervisor type 1, then you might want to use one of these. But if you're just going to be using it on a desktop computer, go ahead and keep on Workstation 17.5 or later. The installer disk. This is looking, I have a Blu-ray drive, so it's looking like, hey, did you burn? Because that's one thing you can do, is you can take that ISO and you can burn it to a disk. Most people don't do this anymore. Most Linuxes you still can if you have a drive. I would say it's slower, so most people are going to actually put on a thumb drive, but we don't need to do any of that because we can just manually select the ISO. So I'm going to browse, and we're going to go to desktop. It's right up here on the top. And now it already says Fedora 64-bit detected. Okay, so this is great. It already knows that this is Fedora. Ubuntu will do the same. Some of your smaller Linux distributions might not. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click next. We can name it. Okay, and this is always a good idea if you're using a certain version of, say, Fedora or Ubuntu, that you might name it. Fedora 64-bit's fine. This is the default location. That's going to be important later if I want to delete. Okay, so that's the default location because I can delete over on the left-hand side. I'll show you this when it's done. But even if I delete it, that doesn't mean it's gone. Okay, you actually have to go into wherever this is. This is in Documents, Virtual Machines, and Fedora. Okay, and in fact, here, let me show you that. So over here on the left-hand side, if I right-click and I say remove, then it removes it only from this panel over here. Okay, that doesn't actually remove it. To fully remove it, I've got to actually go to Documents, and I've got to find the virtual machines. And then once I find it in there, it'll actually show So let's find documents. It'll show the virtual machine inside here. Okay. Okay, so let's click next. Now, number of processors and number of cores per processors. So this is always one that, one and one is probably not enough. Okay, so I'm going to give it one processor, but for this, I've got an 8-core system. So I'm going to go ahead and give it 4. Okay. One thing that's super important is you never want to give more cores than your system has. So for example, if you have a 4-core CPU, don't give it 4 cores, give it 2. As a rule of thumb, usually half of your cores is fine. It depends on how many you have. So we're going to go ahead and say 4 cores here and click next. This is how much memory. It has recommended memory 2 gigabytes. I have 32 gigabytes on this. So I'm going to go ahead. No, I do not. I have 64 gigabytes on this. So I'm going to go ahead and give it more. Okay, so I'm going to give it 4 gigabytes. Again, don't give it more RAM than what you have. Okay, you have to make sure you don't starve your host operating system. So I'm going to give it 4. I could easily give it 8 as well, and that would be just fine. In fact, you know what? Let's do it. I'm going to give it 8 gigabytes. Okay, so 4 cores, 8 gigabytes. So this should perform very, very well. Okay, but again, make sure you leave enough cores and RAM for your own host operating system. So we're going to click next. This is your network connection. So you've got a couple things here. Bridge mode. Okay, this is direct access to the network. The guest must have its own IP address. So if I use bridge networking, it's going to actually go to my DHCP server and it's going to get an IP address within my LAN. Okay, this is a little dangerous, and you should really only do this if it's a very, very trusted virtual machine. Because if you do this and there's any sort of virus or anything else, then it could infect your entire network. So we usually don't use bridge networking unless you're specifically creating something that you want to interact with the rest of your house or something else. So we usually use NAT. Okay, that's going to sandbox this a little bit. Okay, and that's usually better. Okay, so we're going to do that. If you are testing, say for something for viruses or something, go ahead and say do not use a network connection. So say, and be very, very careful if you're testing in a virtual machine. There can be leaks in virtual machines. If it's patched and it's well known, and it's an older virus, you're probably okay, but be very, very careful. A lot of cybersecurity researchers do use this, but just be careful. And you usually don't want to use it on your primary computer. But I can pull the plug on a network connection. And that way it does not have internet connection, but it also can't leak out into the network as long as everything else is secure. So I'm going to click next. This is the SCSI controller. So this is for virtual disks. For the most part, you can leave this on the recommended value of LSI logic. So we're going to click next. This is the type of disk. This does not mean the type of drive you actually have. Now, I do have NVMe drive. Okay, and that's recommended. But I could also say make this a SATA or a SCSI or an IDE. It's going to perform differently. For the most part, you can leave it on recommended, but if you have a problem with the virtual disk, because remember, it's just a file. It's not actually a disk drive. It's just a file. But if you have a problem, you can always try one of these others. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on recommended. Create a new virtual disk. If you're downloading, sometimes you can use an existing virtual disk. For example, there's lots of OS boxes is one. You can go to OS boxes and they, instead of giving you a pre-done virtual machine, they give you a virtual disk. So if you're using a site like OS boxes, I could say use an existing virtual disk, point to the disk that I downloaded from OS boxes, and then I don't even have to install. It's already installed and ready to go. So OS boxes is a very interesting one to look at. But we're going to create a new one because we're going to go through a full install. And this is the maximum size. It's saying 20 gigs. I've got quite a bit of storage. I'm going to go ahead and make this 40. What's nice is it's not going to use all of that initially. Okay, you can say allocate all disk space now, and that's going to be okay. It's going to make a file that's 40 gigabytes and it's ready to go. Okay, I'm not going to do that because it'll grow as needed. Okay, I can also store the virtual disk as a single file. when you start having really large single files, say a 40 gig file, it can cause performance issues. So most people splits into multiple files. Okay. And that's going to be the name of the actual drive, of the virtual drive. And now it's ready to go. But I'm going to also say customize hardware. Okay, so I'm just going to look through. I see, and this is kind of your last point where you can look. Do I want to change anything? So I can say, okay, 8 gigs, that's fine. I got 64 gigs. Processors, I'm using 4. That's fine. I'm not, right now, it does have my drive passing through, but I'm not actually saying use physical drive. I'm saying use the ISO. Okay, network adapter NAT, perfect. USB controller, right now it says USB 2.0. I can actually go ahead and say no, pass it through as a USB 3.1. Okay. Sound card is auto detecting. And display. Accelerate 3D graphics will give a little bit of the memory to the graphics. So you're going to get a little better performance on this. Okay. And then max amount of guest memory, 8 gigs, because that's the RAM. So it's sharing the RAM basically to make a virtual GDDR. Okay, we're going to click close, and we're going to click finish. And the checkmark box is for power on, so it's automatically going to power on. Now, this is saying that I've got side channel mitigations on. Okay, it offers enhanced security but lower performance. So we can change this once it's started, and I can show you how to do that. But we're going to press OK for now. And it's now booting just like a real computer. And now remember, this is, I'm going to have to click inside and then use my, so once I click in here, I can use my arrow keys. Okay, so I can test this media and start, or I can start. I'm going to go ahead and go up with my arrow key and press enter. And we're going to start Fedora. Now, one of the interesting things as I do this is it looks like, well, hey, it's already installed. It's not. And one of the beautiful things of almost all Linux distributions is they can do something called live. Okay, so this is a live boot. So if I install this ISO onto a flash drive, I could actually boot any computer to that flash drive and use Linux without ever installing it. Okay, it's an amazing feature of Linux distributions. And in fact, it's really good in order to do a lot of troubleshooting, even on Windows machines. Sometimes I'll take a USB, boot into a Linux distribution, look at the hard drives, go into the files, make changes, things like this, and then I can literally turn off the computer, unplug the flash drive, and the Windows boots back up. Okay. Since we're here, and you can just play around, we do not have to install Fedora right now, but we are going to install. So we're going to click Install Fedora. And then the bootloader will come up. Notice down here, it's saying, you know, would you like to install? When you're finished installing, put I finish installing. We're not. We're still installing. So right here in this is going to be we're English, US, so it clicks next. It already found the destination. Okay. This is a little different. So they've updated this quite a bit, which is quite nice. It used to be that you would have to click, which I can find an older Fedora if you would like at some point, and just let me know in the comments. And show you how to do it, because Fedora, Ubuntu's always made it a little easier. Fedora sometimes is a little strange on the installer because you have to click into the disk drive and then click back out. You're basically like clicking in the disk drive, saying done, and then clicking back out. So they've updated their installer here quite a bit. It's already found this. Use entire disk. Again, because remember, I could be dual booting, but we're in a virtual machine, so we're not dual booting. This is not use entire disk. This is not my actual, remember, this is just a file. It's a virtual disk. This is not my actual hard drive. It's not erasing my hard drive, okay? Because we're in a virtual machine. So I click next. You can encrypt your data. Again, if this is bare metal, I would definitely say to do that. You can still do this if you want in a virtual disk, but we're not going to. And now it's automatically looking at the formatting. Right here, that's our boot. So it's making a separate partition for that. That's going to be slash. That's going to be where all of the major stuff, but it's also going to make a separate one for home, which is actually really nice because that way my user, I can actually kind of back up just home, especially when you do bare metal. So we're going to erase and install, and it's going. And we're done. And I have to say, this is my first, I've installed Fedora Linux for many, many years, but this is the new 42 edition. I have to say the new installer is amazing. This is really, really good. So now it says you've installed. So I can exit to live desktop. Down here, I'm going to say I finished installing. Now, I am not on, so what's important to understand is even though I have this right now, I'm not actually on Fedora yet. So I'm going to go up here to the start. And yes, there are buttons up here for suspend, shut down, but treat every operating system in a virtual machine like your real operating system because it is. So go up here to the start. I'm going to go to start down here, and I'm going to go ahead and go to power off. And we're going to say power off. Now, technically, I could just reboot and it would be just fine, but I'm going to go ahead and change this side channel mitigation just so that warning doesn't keep coming up. Side channel mitigations is good to have on, but we don't actually have to have it. So it's here. And by the way, if for some reason you start up and all I see is this, and I go, wait a sec, where's all my virtual machines? Go up to the top, find this, and show your sidebar. Okay, so a lot of times people forget that's there. So I'm going to click on this, and notice it launches in a new tab. So I've got home, and now I've got this. So I'm going to edit here. And we are going to go to options. And this is now some new stuff that I have, which is really nice to see. So you can see the guest operating system's already marked as Linux. The power, there's this. Shared folders, very, very cool. Okay, so now that I have this installed, I can actually, in fact, this is extremely helpful if it's, say, you're using it for another job or something else. You can create a folder in, say, your Windows or your host operating system or Linux, and you can share it with the virtual machine. So what's really nice about that is you can go back and forth with it and say, okay, great, let me drop a file in here, and it appears, and it goes both ways. Snapshots is great. So you can actually go, and I'll show you here in a second how to make a snapshot, which is really nice after you first install and it's all done. But we can say, okay, when powering off, revert to snapshot. So say that you make a new install, you update it, you do everything, but you almost want it to act as a fresh computer every time. You can actually change this so when you power off, automatically go back to the snapshot. So it's like a fresh version every time you come in. Now remember, any updates or anything you did after you made the snapshot will revert back. But this is kind of nice. You can also say take a new snapshot. Okay, auto protect, guest isolation. Right now I enable drag and drop and enable copy and paste. If you're dealing with a virtual machine that you're not really sure of, you might want to disable these. Okay, but otherwise this is really nice for, say, if you're copying and pasting directions. Access control, it's not encrypted. VMware, we can actually sync that. VNC connections, which is really amazing. So I can actually turn this on and then I can remotely, say in my LAN, connect to a virtual machine. Okay. Appliance view, we're not using. Auto login, it doesn't support. And then advanced. And in advanced, if you look down here, it says disable side mitigations for Hyper-V enabled hosts. Hyper-V is another Microsoft built-in virtualization tool if you have Windows Pro, and it's actually quite good. So we're going to go ahead and disable. Okay. Right now it's on BIOS rather than UEFI. You can change this, but once you've installed, you probably shouldn't. So I'm going to press OK, and now we're going to power it on. Now, what else I'm going to do is I'm going to go up on the top right, and this is always a good idea. So I'm going to enter full screen. So that way, when I'm in here, I get the full experience, and I don't have anything else. So it looks like, for all intents and purposes, I'm just running this. Okay, and if I need to get out, I just bounce up to the top. Okay, I can always click this and go back to the windowed mode. But if I click this, I'm back. So now we're going to actually set it up. So this is the install. This is no longer the live. Okay, so I'm going to click next, and it's already determined that. Location services, I'm going to go ahead and turn off. Automatic problem, I'm going to go ahead and leave on. I trust Fedora Linux quite a bit. Search cities, so I'm going to type in Los Angeles, and right there. Enable third-party repositories. Now, this is very interesting that they've added this. forever, Fedora's always been pure open source, meaning that a lot of your extra codecs and stuff like your MP3 codecs, which has copyright issues, are not included by default. And the idea is, and it's really a philosophy, is that no, this should be pure and open source. Things that aren't pure and open source are not included natively. Ubuntu's always had this third-party repositories, whether that's for NVIDIA drivers, which are proprietary, for video cards, things like this. They've pretty much always allowed you to enable it. If you want a pure Linux open source experience, do not enable this. And it's just fine. And say later, you're like, well, I want MP3. You can actually go ahead and pay for a license and get that. But we're going to say enable, just because sometimes there might be a driver or something. But again, one thing that's interesting is, remember, you're not going to really have as many driver issues per se with a virtual machine because you're not installing it on bare metal. All of your hardware is virtualized. Yes, you are using your CPU, and yes, you're using your RAM, but it's passing through. So a lot of your other items that's attached, like chipsets and things like this, you usually don't have to worry about because it's virtualized. So we're going to click next, and we're going to type our name. And we can change the username. So I'm going to keep this as msmith. And we're going to go to next. Enterprise login, by the way. If you are connected to LDAP servers, things like this, you can click this and you can actually use the virtual machine to connect to some of that. We're going to set a password. And ideally, this should be a very good password. You can tell right now that this is not, but this is just for demonstration purposes. But, make this a good password. Treat this like a real operating system because it is. It's just virtualized. We're going to click next. And that's it. Start using Fedora. Okay, so we're in. There's a little tour. You can look around. This is GNOME. So if you've not used GNOME before, basically, if you want to see all your apps, you go down here to the grid. And there's your grid. Okay, and that's all of your apps. If you want to install apps, you can go to software. And of course, there's more ways and terminal, everything else. But for now, this is kind of a big one. What I am going to do, though, first, because it's a good idea, because I want to take a snapshot. Okay, because now I'm totally set up. Okay, this, by the way, often takes a little bit because basically it's going to the repository, refreshing everything, seeing what needs to be done. Okay, so I can go in here, I can search, I can explore, things like this. Okay, notice there's already a bunch of updates. I'm not going to use the GUI message for update, so I'm going to teach you the first command. So we're going to go down here. I'm going to use terminal quite a bit, so I'm going to right click. I'm going to actually say pin to dash. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is because now if I go to the top left, okay, this on the top left will bring up this, and there's a lot of shortcut keys for this too. Okay. But basically, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to open up terminal. And on here, I'm going to type sudo, okay, because I need to do that, and DNF update, okay? And what this is going to do, and it's going to say, hey, you're using sudo, because I'm going to be administrator for a little bit, and I'm going to put in my password, and I keep typing it wrong, and it's okay. There we go. And remember, when you type a password in Linux, it does not show ... Okay, so you just have to trust that when you're typing it, it's correct. So what this is going to do now is this is going to go through and actually update everything. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes, and we're going to let this update. Okay, and when it gets all back, I'm going to shut this down, and then I'm going to take a snapshot. Okay, so in this right here, this is a key. Okay, so this is basically saying that it's importing a particular key, a signature, for this, which is kind of like a hash, if you were. So this is saying, is this okay? And I'm saying yes. Basically, make sure you're looking at it and saying, where's this coming from? I can see right here, this is coming from the Fedora project. So I'm going to go ahead and trust this. And now the key is going to be imported, which will allow it to finish installing the updates. Now, understand that even though this is a brand new install, and you saw we just downloaded this, there's quite a few updates. And I want to say a couple things about that. One, be prepared for it to update for 10 to 15 minutes, but it's a good idea for you to do that right away because even once they create the ISO and release it, lots of updates come between. Also know that as far as like lots of updates, so will Windows. If you install Windows, even if you get a fresh copy of it, there's still going to be a lot of updates. So the idea that, you're waiting 10 to 15 minutes to update, that's still actually fairly common. The other thing that's unusual when you look at Linux, if you've never installed Linux before, is it seems like there's a lot of files. Remember, Linux is much more modular than Windows. So there's lots of separate, it's very much like Lego blocks. And that's part of why Linux can be very large or very, very small. Okay. In fact, a lot of, your embedded systems and stuff in cars, same things in a lot of rovers, say on Mars, things like that. Say run Linux because it can be extremely small. You can download a Linux distribution that's 400 megabytes or smaller. Okay, and that's that Lego modular. So when you see a lot of this stuff, it might be like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. It is, but it's a lot of times because it's a lot of separate, very small little libraries and files. So we can now X this out. And now we're going to go ahead and go here and start, and we're going to shut power off again. The reason why we're going to power off this time is because I want to make sure to go ahead and take a snapshot. It's all up to date. It's ready to go. So now if I revert back, it's going to be at least up to date as of today. So if I can't see everything, I'm going to bounce up to the top. Okay. And when I bounce up to the top, okay, all I've got to do is exit full screen. Okay. And I'm back here. So now let's go ahead and take a snapshot. So I'm going to go to VM. I'm going to go to snapshot. I'm going to say take a snapshot. And this is a really good idea. So I'm going to say fresh install and updated. And I'm just going to put the date. And that way I say take a snapshot. And if anything, say later, I really mess this up, I can go to VMware, snapshot, and I can say revert. Okay. So that is a basic overview of how to download and install VMware. I didn't show the actual install process, but basically you say yes and click next. And then, but setting up VMware and also installing Fedora Linux. So hopefully you enjoyed this and this helps. Thanks.